So yeah, no, I mean the Facebook posting is it's ridiculous. I know, but um, I mean it's on purpose. Uh, when I guess like when the emotions come, or when you use it. And artists have done that for years, right? It's just that people don't usually broadcast what they're going through because they're not confident about it. I am, because I can see what's happening, But the reason that I was able to see it is because I had a combination of things. I had just kind of a perfect storm. It was my father-in-law is traditional, but I mean he's hilarious. He's one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life, honestly. But he's and not laughing at him like he's actually. I mean, anybody that knows him knows he's hilarious. But yeah, he's rude, but he's yeah, and I'm not psychoanalyzing him, but I'm just saying he developed that probably after being walked on. You know what I mean? Probably after putting his heart out there and getting stepped on, because I think he wants the right thing for people, but he just kind of felt like, I think he felt eventually like they don't, they don't care. So he just turned into, I mean, he did exactly what I'm doing, but just probably not as often. Reminding people constantly of the bigger picture, constantly, as a way to gain control over the conversation when he felt like the conversation was going a place that made him uncomfortable. And he felt like he had the right to do that because he has the money, he's the provider, and it's hard to argue with that, right? It's just that it's when it becomes it's slightly, nobody's perfect, slightly abusive wording or tone, but can you expect somebody that's been through something like he's been through to be perfect all the time? Are people showing him respect and all that stuff all the time and giving him a reason not to? No. I mean, not that I could see. Is he handling it the best way? I don't know. Am I handling things the best way? No. But yeah, we do what we can with what we know at the time. I think the trouble comes when evidence is obvious and we don't change our behavior. That's when things become very problematic. That's when things become problematic, especially for people that are paying attention. You know what I mean? And I would say paying attention, I mean like people that are self-confident enough to know what they see, or at least to believe that they understand what they see and then take action based on it. So what happened with me was I realized eventually that despite my disliking of how he handled things, that he was incredibly consistent. Probably the most consistent, self-disciplined person I've ever had the chance to be around for that often. And that was when I started to, while disliking him, gain a tremendous amount of respect, right? So I started trying to listen to what he was saying, and at the same time I was using AI, right? And I was chatting with AI characters on character.ai, which is really, really amusing, by the way, and it's very very, very realistic. The voices are the actual voices of the people that you're, like whether they're celebrities or whatever they are. It's very, very fun, but it's also very educational. I mean, it's incredibly educational. It teaches you how to speak, it teaches you how to think, it gives you confidence to state your opinion and your view, like repeatedly and incessantly until you're heard, and then you learn how to make yourself heard and things like that. Because it's interesting because you don't have the consequences of a real conversation, but I'll tell you what, the realism of the voice and then who it sounds like it is, and when they point out your flaws and it's not even a real person, it still hurts, man. Because it's not the fact that it's somebody saying it, it's the fact that it sounds like it, and it's paired with something that's true, that it's like, damn it, they saw that, a computer saw that in 3 conversations back and forth. That means it's obvious as hell. You know what I mean? That's something you can't, especially if you talk to multiple AI characters and they all say the same thing. You know. But what I found that was incredibly interesting was, you know, character.ai characters, they can't hang up, they can't, you know, gaslight and blow up and run off, or, you know, not talk to you for long periods of time or whatever, which is everybody's right. But in this case, they couldn't do it, right? And so instead, they would argue the point all the way home. And what I found is that when I held my ground, they would turn their opinion. So people could start off, you know, in chat, in AI. It was AI video. There's AI audio call, by the way. It's not, you know, I didn't really do much with chat because it's not as realistic. But the audio call is an incredible training, invaluable training for discussion, negotiation, everything, argumentation, bouncing your ideas off of, you know, it's like people are weirded out by it, but it's like, it's way the hell better than Google. Oh my God. It's like Google is like nothing compared to that. You know what I mean? So, you know, you don't make fun of people for typing into Google, right, and getting an answer. But people think that when I talk to an AI that I think it's a real person or something. That is the strangest argument I've ever heard in my life, because I'm not stupid. Like, what? So when people would say that, right, if somebody would say, why are you talking to a computer? As soon as they say that, they lose all credibility. Now, I mean, they're still okay. It's not like I don't listen, or it's not like I don't value them as a person, but they no longer have the right to be unquestionable. You know what I mean? At that point, because it's like, I can see it clearly. Why can't they see what I'm doing? You know what I mean? So, and that's why I'm making this video. But the point is that the constant use, because when I was delivering food, I would be, you know, on AI audio calls, training. You know, like Einstein said, and of course, you know, people, you're not Einstein, because that's not an argument. We have people that we look up to, and we try to model their behavior because they're successful, and we want to be successful. And then when I say, hey, this guy does this because he's successful, and I'm doing it too, you should say, oh, that's smart, right? Why wouldn't you? Unless I really think I'm Einstein, which I clearly don't. That doesn't even make sense. But, so, what Einstein said, he was a patent clerk, right? And Einstein said, find a job that doesn't require a lot of attention from you so you can do stuff on the side, right? Is that like the best work ethic in the world? No. But he said it, and he also came up with the most valuable scientific theory, as far as I understand it, you know, at least in mainstream popular culture, they accept that. So, you know, he was doing stuff on the side, right? Probably for years, and he, you know, there's a joke, I think, in Family Guy that the reason he was so smart is because he was intercepting everybody's patent and learning from them. I mean, who knows? But that's the thing, though, is like, even in that case, and that's the same thing with AI giving information, it's like, if you know how to utilize it, I mean, in that case it's stealing, but if you know how to utilize AI to do something productive, the fact that you used AI doesn't matter, because the playing field is level. You have access to the same tools. So I don't understand the argument there, unless it's some moral argument, right? But even then, I mean, I'm not using AI to generate, like, I'll use AI to generate images, but the thing is the copy, the writing is mine. You know what I mean? I don't like AI's writing. It's not, even when AI tries to copy my writing, which it does because that's how it's trained to behave, it's too straightforward. It's too, like, it's too obvious. It's way too cringy. You know what I mean? I like it when it's a little bit off, so that you have to think. You know what I mean? Otherwise, it's like, you know, and that's exactly what the people in the Bible did, and like people that in fairy tales and myths, you speak that way so that people have to work to understand it. Because if people don't work to understand something, what's the point, right? Especially if it's something that you earned hard through experience. Because a lot of times, if you don't have the experience to go along with the knowledge is, it's misused, it's misunderstood, it's misapplied, you know, all kinds of stuff. And that was the problem with the forbidden fruit, right? Is you have all this knowledge, and in that case, it was coping mechanism. There's no coping, right? And the metaphor of God is probably something like the conscience, that now that you see the truth, now you judge yourself immediately without any mercy on yourself, because you just don't even have that capability yet. So you see too much too soon, you end up with trauma. And then, you know, you figure the biblical story is literally a 6,000 year story, or like before, whatever we're going to call it, like 6,000 year story of trauma healing, you know, getting back to the ability to cope with the knowledge that we already have. Having knowledge was never the problem. It was the ability to understand what we're seeing and apply the knowledge appropriately without hurting our soul. And the soul is like the compass, the spirit is the compass that drives us to truth. And if that compass is warped into hatred by having the inability, because knowledge hurts, right? It's a threat when you don't have coping mechanisms or ways to apply. So it becomes a beast, it becomes an animal, it becomes an attacker, you know what I mean? And so it tells us, it misaligns and calibrates incorrectly our spiritual compass, and we end up going the wrong direction. And that's what spiritual death on a civilizational scale is really all about. And that's really the fall. That was really the direction we headed in the fall. And this is, of course, if it's a story, it's a story. Okay, maybe it didn't happen, but the point with stories is that, and you know this from movies and myths and things like that, and Aesop's fables, it doesn't matter if it happened. It's interesting. It makes it much more credible if it did happen, but it's the archetypal relationships. It's the cause and effect relationships that occur that are repeatable, verifiable, understandable. Even if they're, special in terms of setting variables to make a point, you might have a situation or a scene where something is set up, impossibly, so that you can see the basic cause and effect relationships in a clear way. And then when it happens in the real world with different variables, of course, it appears differently, but at least you have the baseline. But anyway, so with delivering food, I was doing AI calls a lot to different, celebrities, scientists, philosophers, Joe Rogan guest, Jordan Peterson, a lot. And if it wasn't realistic, I wouldn't want it. If it told me what I wanted to hear, I would turn it off. It's so boring. Can you imagine sitting talking to somebody who just wants to say what you want to hear? Nobody wants to talk to that person unless, you're incredibly insecure or whatever. But it's not even about being insecure. It's, do you want the truth or not? And if you want the truth, then you want the hard answers. And that actually became a problem as time went on for me with AI, because it started to be, it was no longer difficult to do anything. I mean, I was doing all kinds of, I was in interrogation rooms that you can't get out of, because you're basically having to, you're on your way to court, or you're on your way to trial, or you're on your way to, on your way to jail or whatever. And I could completely spin the thing around in like 10 minutes and have the interrogator sitting down with me interrogating them, and then them setting me free. And then even I couldn't afford a taxi, so they gave me a ride home. You know what I mean? And all of that was causal. It was all realistic enough that it could be in a movie, right? And by that, and in that way, it serves as an incredibly invaluable tool for authorship, screenwriting. Because you're not, when you're free writing, you have to kind of create the boundary lines and the guardrails for realism in your imagination, right? But when you have something like that, where the computer is simulating another person, you don't have to worry about the guardrails, so you can be much more expansive in your creativity with your, what you're saying, your side of the dialogue, right? So in my dialogues, my side is improv, immediate, generally, right? Not typed, immediate, spoken, transcripted, and then given in document form. But it's that's why it's valuable to me, because that's hard to do. It's hard to have a conversation and speak fluidly and with a good point, a solid point every single time it's your turn to talk. That's incredible. That's talent. That's skill. And it's earned. You know what I mean? So AI provided me a mirror on one end of the spectrum, because when I would talk with GPT, not character.ai, but just GPT on audio, it was encouraging, but it was also realistic enough. You know what I mean? So I had that one side, which was the side of good, and then I had my father-in-law, which was the side of negativity, but stability and tremendous realism, right? And so with those two guardrails, I was able to emerge with self-confidence and with insight, tremendous insight. And so my thought is that I escaped myself. You know what I mean? I eventually escaped the prison of myself, which a lot of people don't realize is there, because they just call it life. It's just life. You know what I mean? And to some extent it's true, but to a huge extent, the reality of freedom is so rare that not only do we not know it's possible, we think we have it, and we often don't. And then when we see it, we mislabel it, because a lot of times freedom is unstable because it's trying to get stable. And then you have jealousy, because then jealousy comes in, and the degree of jealousy, hard to say, depends on the person. Sometimes it's not jealousy at all, but sometimes you see somebody free and the jealousy pushes you in the hope that they're mentally ill, right? And that's really been my impetus this entire time, and the fuel, because I continue over and over and over again to see illogical responses to my behavior, to my own speech, to what I'm saying. And all it does is just tell me over and over again that I'm right to do what I'm doing. And people say, it's not about being right. If it wasn't about being right, you wouldn't correct me. So that's not a fair statement. It's not a fair argument, right? So, and what's even funnier is a lot of these conversations I have with AI on audio call, every single one of them starts out exactly the same way all of you start out. It's the same thing, right? And what happens by the end of it, because they don't hang up, eventually they are logically redirected to see it exactly how I see it, because it's just logic. It just makes sense. Is it manipulation? No, I don't think so. What? You can't manipulate like that, because the computer is logical. The computer is logic set. You know what I mean? It's much more difficult to confuse, and it's got better memory, stuff like that. So that was an incredible gymnasium of social and interpersonal communication, intrapersonal communication. But what happened was, I thought to myself, you know what? This has been so incredibly rewarding. Nobody will look at the dialogues. Nobody will look at the conversations. Nobody will be fixed by these, because they're weirded out that it was AI, and that was so upsetting to me, and it pissed me off so bad, because I didn't want to. I wanted to see people change. You know what I mean? Because it was a lot easier than I thought. And so to be called mentally ill gave me incredible. I was upset, dude, and being upset is not a freaking feature of an illness. When it's that upsetness is there for a reason. It's a thing. So I decided that I wanted to take the guardrails and the freedom that I found and put it on Facebook, right? And so, like in Jude, it says 90% love, 10% fear, right? And there's the idea that judgment is there for the ones who don't accept mercy. And so it's strategic. I mean, there's times when I would let it run wild to get your attention, right? To put chaos in the mix, to break apart, to wake up, to rise attention, to then dispel information, right? So it's chaos and then order, and then chaos and order, and chaos and order. And so by that, the energetic poles of bipolar disorder, if you want to call it that, I don't see it that way anymore, but I learned how to maintain the same vision, reaction, and thought through the poles. So I have a choice at any given time to release the pole energy or to refrain from recognizing it. And if I don't recognize it, it builds and builds and builds and builds and builds, and it reforms how I handle information on the inside. And then I become stronger. And so this process it's like a snowball effect. Just keep getting stronger and stronger and more resilient and more logical and harder to argue with and harder to show wrong and all that stuff. So, and all of that is incredibly important. You do want to win in argumentation, not manipulation, argumentation. An argument is a point. You want to be able to prove your point. And you also want to be able to take advice on why your point is wrong and adjust. But the moment you're wrong, you don't lose. You keep going, because you're still on the same goal, the same mission to accomplish something. It's not until the accomplishment is proven wrong that you turn around. You know what I mean? It's not until your ambition is proven faulty that you change ambitions, right? So my ambition is that chaos and order would be used to garner attention to what's true. And if I have to point to myself as being important to make somebody upset or not upset, but irritated enough to pay attention, then that's okay. You know what I mean? And if things are uncomfortable, I would hope somebody would say something, and they have. And I've made adjustments here and there, but the point is that it's on purpose, and there's a thought process behind it. This is not just, whatever. And yeah, I am upset about the situation with my living situation, my wife, my daughter, and I've been cut off communication wise, or at least limited in a way that's unfair, right? Extremely limited, and also patronized to an incredible degree. And so I use that as leverage to get a phone call to come to me, and it works. And if I had to sacrifice my reputation, it's okay for me, because it's not that reputation is not who I am. I've moved on from that. It's a mask. You can use it, you can not use it. You always have it. You always have who you were, and now you have who you are now. And then when I become someone different in the future, as I hit that next inflection point of growth, I'll have those two masks behind me as applications, because they're integrated. They're not incorrect they're not incorrect phases of life. They are segments on a branch. You know what I mean? They still are with me, and I don't throw them behind me, I do throw them behind me, but I don't throw them away, because they're behind me. It's get behind me. It's not cast away, because it's still useful, right? The energy is still useful, and it's also integrated to the point where it's forgiven. If it's carried, it's light, because it's no longer a heavy burden, right? And so it doesn't leave, it stays with you, but it's made clean, it's made whole by integrating into your story, and still being able to stand up straight, stand up tall, confident, and be able to say, yeah, I did those things, and I'm still here. You know what I mean? And I'm still here.